In Germany, for the annual Munich Security Conference, Vice President Kamala Harris is making sure supporting Ukraine remains a top priority of America's European allies.
But by September, it was clear there was real trouble. Among other things, the corruption was so wild among the top, even including Zelensky. They're all fighting for what percentage of the money they're going to steal. There was a lot of fighting and brooding about that, even today.
To see you again here in Munich and talk about, as a priority, our commitment as a partner to the people of Ukraine and many other issues.
Her lobbying coming moments after Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the conference, urging leaders to hurry up on decisions to deliver crucial military assistance.
There is no alternative to speed, because it is the speed that the life depends on. Delay has always been and still is a mistake.
Back in Washington, President Joe Biden is facing mixed signals from Republicans on more U.S. aid. Although some House Republicans want House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to tighten his grip on federal spending, others penned a letter to the White House asking Biden to send combat aircrafts to Ukraine for the first time. Across the Hill, Senate lawmakers say there's bipartisan backing for continued support.
We're going to continue to flow weapons to the Ukraine so they can defend themselves and evict the Russian invaders.
So Raytheon can keep making next year's new models.
Poland next week to mark 1 year since Russia went on the attack. He departs on Monday.
President Biden will thank President Duda and, in fact, the Polish people for the $3.8 billion in military and humanitarian assistance that they have provided to Ukraine over the past year, and for all the efforts that the Polish people have done to generously welcome more than 1.5 million refugees from Ukraine.
The president's trip follows his approval of $10 billion in arms sales to Poland. The U.S. has already spent or pledged $30 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the war began. In Washington, Torian Small, Spectrum News.
Great job.
BritnGriner making her return to the WNBA after spending nearly 10 months in a Russian prison. She has reportedly signed a one-year deal to rejoin the Phoenix Mercury. Griner spent off seasons playing for a Russian women's basketball team. She was arrested in February of 2022 and later convicted of drug possession charges. Russian officials say she was found with vape cartridges in her carry-on luggage at an airport. Griner was released back into U.S. custody in December thanks to a prisoner exchange. The 32-year-old has spent her entire career with Phoenix since being selected as the #1 overall pick in the 2013 draft. It is time for a quick break, but don't go anywhere. There's much more news ahead, and we'll also take another look at this upcoming week's forecast. Stay with us.
It is a sentiment that many students agree with.
We all go through, problematic situations, through life. It's a natural thing, but to also understand that, that's not where, that's not the end all.
Black people have been, we've been on an ongoing fight. And I feel like it should be recognized and everybody should come together.
This marked the first time that Johnson brought his concert series to Brooklyn. And for our last story, let's check out Staten Island University Hospital, where if you're craving a can of soda or a bag of chips, you might be surprised.
Both on and off Broadway in a major way. Onstage host Frank DeLella sat down with the leaders of the theater to talk more about this award-winning cultural institution.
The National Black Theater is the longest running black theater in New York City, founded in 1968 by our founder, Dr. Barbara Ann Tier, happens to be my mother. And we have been located in Harlem for over a half century, producing, developing new contemporary works by African-American playwrights, directors, and with a focus on social impact, social justice, but most importantly, Black liberation as themes to all of the work we produce. So in 1968, really on the heels of Dr. King's assassination, the height of the civil rights movement, and the birthplace of the Black arts movement, so many Black artists were turning to institution building.
You have to own your own space, because if you don't, you can get put out the streets.
My My mother, having been an actor and a director, started out as a dancer, really found the need to bring representation, not just on stage, but in the playwright, in the audience, to the forefront. And then very quickly, her company of liberators really were creating new works that were, you know, in conversations with the Baldwins of the world, with the Amiri Barakas, the Maya Angelou's, the Nina Simone's, and it was this uptown bohemian black art scene. You know, I say MBT's having the best year ever from Beyonce to Broadway. This is the year that, you know, Beyonce sampled my mother in Alien Superstar.
We dress a certain way, we walk a certain way, we talk a certain way.
Right, it's the year that MBT will go to Broadway for the first time. It feels incredible.
The king, my queen, is dead. Huh? It's Shakespeare, kind of.
You watch too much PBS. And why it feels so incredible is that we've always stayed the course, right? MBT's mascot is a turtle. We understand that the race is long, and that when you plant seeds of radical care in a population of people where we don't get the privilege of that in rooms that were never built for us to be in, that eventually the world will catch up.
Frank Tillella, New York 1. Season thus far. We'll shine a spotlight on the critically acclaimed productions of Tom Stoppart's Leopoldstadt and the new musical Kimberly Akimbo. Plus, we'll spend the day with Anne Juliet herself, Lorna Courtney.
I was working a shift at the gym that I worked at the time, and they told me that I was offered the role of Juliet and Juliet. And I had the phone on speaker, so everyone heard, and they were all like, oh my God. And we were just like jumping up and down screaming, and everyone was like, what is going on?
All that and more this weekend on Onstage at 7:30 and 10:30 p.m.
That it is bittersweet. It is sweet in that justice moved very swiftly, which I'm being told by attorneys was the strategy of his lawyer. It's bitter because, of course, in the last days of hearing from the families of the emotion that was in the courtroom, kind of the things that we almost had a scab from the scar and starting, to heal, it opened those wounds up probably even wider. And then to hear him speak for the first time and give what I think is probably the phoniest apology that I've ever heard in my life. It made it pretty tough to hear his voice, but it is liberating to be able to finally say his name. And that was given to us permission by the families. I wouldn't say his name until I heard somebody from the family say, we want people to say his name so that he is always associated with evil.
Wow, that's very powerful.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
You know, one of the things that came out of this is the need for, fresh food in communities. We kind of shed
That's
light
what
on
you
that
get
issue.
out of a
We've
mass
heard about
murder.
this, but the store's
These
back
people
open,
are so fucking
and I'm
stupid.
wondering, is East Buffalo in a better position now, or is it still lacking access to the fresh foods and vegetables it needs? Because it's still the only grocery store in that area.
It is still the only grocery store in the area. One thing that is happening is that there is a young man, Alex, who your station has highlighted before in the past, who is going to be opening up in what we call, ironically enough, our fruit belt section that has no fruit. And the government is stepping up those efforts to help. The state government has stepped up its efforts as far as dollars, federal government as far as gun legislation. But the community as a whole is not going to change simply by the infusion of dollars. if there is not a plan of what are we looking for, what's the end result. Because just putting dollars in a neighborhood and gentrifying a neighborhood, and then the people who were there during the murders, will they be able to afford to stay? And I think that's what government needs to step up and do, is not just money, but plans.
That leads me to my next question. What do you think are the contributing factors to these food deserts? Do you think it's, low-income residents, lack of transportation? I feel like those are kind of like the pillars of a community in need.
I'll say this because you invite me on, so, I talk straight up. Part of it is white supremacy. Black people do not own grocery stores, major grocery stores. It's still headed up mainly by white males who make the decisions of where to go. Now, I say that, but of course, grocery stores are not in philanthropic business. They're there to make money. And so when they look at the economy, the economics in a neighborhood, then they decide, and I've been involved in this for over 12 years, and even before, when there was a black grocery store right on Jefferson. It was called Figmo's, and it ended up going under, but I remember us donating money at our church. I was a teenager. People donating money to get Figmo's open. But when you talk about racism, it starts in economics, and so at the end of the day, that's where we have these food deserts, because the economics, but the economics go back to education and access. So for me to just say, let's put a supermarket without a super plan, is kind of a formula for failure if we don't change the entire neighborhood. And that, unfortunately, people don't want to have the real conversation. That starts with education. That starts with empowerment. It does not start with money that's given during our mourning. We need money that comes in the morning, that is for schools and all of these places that end up keeping us in a cycle of poverty.
So true. That's very powerful as well.
Yeah, really.
What do you see as the nutritional impacts for people in these communities? Because just like you said, education is key, but if people don't eat, they're not able to concentrate, they're not able to retain, they're not able to dream, to look to the future. What do you see as some of the, impacts?
When you don't have fresh food, and then when you don't know how to prepare fresh food, you end up going to that which is laden with salt. You end up going to that which is easy to cook. You end up going to places, fast food, and some of these kids in our neighborhoods have been raised on fast food and canned goods. And so that's what I'm saying. It's a whole mindset. And that's why I'm glad for other people who are coming in, like Alex was saying, we need to eat fresh. We need to have fresh. In the past, grocery stores and the grocery store, even Tops, and they have gone on record about the changes that we had to force Tops to make in the past. When you would go into Tops on Jefferson and you had a lot of fresh fruit there that wasn't fresh. And so people it was a known in the neighborhood, like, oh, I'm not going to Tops for fresh food if I need it. They then cleaned up their act. Some years ago, I think it's been about 9 years now, that we went in Tops and said there's a problem, and even before then. So it's about our health, it's about our longevity, and the more education that we could give. Like now, Tops has a video looping in the store of how to cook fresh foods. That was never there before. And I commend them on that. You have to see it. You got to know it. But if I go to a suburban store, the fresh foods aisle is much bigger than what it is in an urban store. So it is, again, it's a whole system and culture that is going to have to change.
All right, let's take a break right here for this conversation, because I want to keep you around. I love getting a chance to talk to you. So stick with me. Buffalo Common Council President Pridgen is staying here. We'll have more on In Focus in just a couple of minutes. You're going to want to hear this conversation. Stay with us.
What's Cheryl Willis talking about? I can only imagine. History.
Talk to us about why the 50th anniversary is so special, especially for you coming from the South Bronx where it was born.
Absolutely. Coming from the South Bronx, and I grew up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my whole lifespan is the lifespan, essentially, of hip-hop in this country. And I remember in the early days, people said that it wouldn't last, it wasn't good, and it's changed the world, right? And that's who we are as New Yorkers, right? We are the trendsetters, we change the world, and it is so appropriate that we celebrate this anniversary, this cultural art form, the business that it created, the Black wealth that it created, and wealth of color. It is so important for us as a city to really lean into our hip-hop roots and celebrate it as we move forward.
And protect the legacy for anyone that wants to try to say it's not from the South Bronx. I'm hearing little rumblings of that. And I'm like, when did this start?
Well, that's why the Universal Hip Hop Museum is in the Bronx. Thank you. Yes, it is.
What a pleasure to speak to you again. But now in this historic position as the first Black woman deputy mayor, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service to this city.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I really appreciate you.
Good to see you, my friend.
Yeah.
Okay, just ahead on In Focus, the president of Black Edfluencers United is here. His thoughts on the College Board change for AP African American Studies. You probably heard about that. And later,
Video music box in full effect. We're doing it backstage at the Apollo. I told you we was going to sit down and kick it with Aaliyah.
look at him kicking it with Aaliyah back in the day. The founder of Video Music Box, Ralph McDaniels, is here as we celebrate 50 years of hip-hop. We'll be right back. Talk about,
yes, we do.
What is the College Board doing with African American AP Studies? This has caused a firestorm across the country. And as an educator who has your legacy, your mother is an incredible educator, what do you make of what's happening?
Well, I wouldn't even call it African American Studies anymore. I would call it Deceptive Curriculum 101. That what we're doing is that we're changing history. And this is the very reason why we are fighting here in New York for a Black Studies curriculum with organizations like Black Influencers United and the whole Education Equity Action Plan Coalition. We're trying to correct a historic wrong. We're focusing on not being exclusive, but being inclusive by including those who've been historically excluded from the curriculum. And it seems like every time Black people try to assert themselves, teach their history, we're thirsting for a knowledge of who we are under attack like no other group when it comes to us asserting our contributions to America.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about hip-hop because you are the nation's hip-hop principal and you're very proud of that. So as a principal, you were right here in New York City. Talk to us about how you used hip-hop to reach at-risk students.
Well, I use it as a communication tool and really as a whole school reform tool. If we can market hip-hop to sell sneakers and sell, soda and all these other products, why can't we use hip-hop to market academic excellence to our children? And so we use hip-hop to connect with young people through the curriculum, but we also used it to kind of get our students to understand that they're part of a community and that they have a responsibility to make sure that their school is great. And then what we did was we looped it into all the prerequisite learning standards. So if you are a writer, an effective writer, you could be an effective filmmaker. If you're an effective mathematician, you can know how to operate a budget. And so we took the standards at that time, which would be called the learning targets or the new generation standards of today, and we made it alive in the student's mind, not something that just sat on the wall, but something that they could actually participate. And the result was that we went from the lowest performing school in that area of Queens to #1 in reading and math, and we're so proud of that legacy work, and we see it now being duplicated all throughout the country.
All throughout the country, so you're a trailblazer. So before we go, since you're the nation's hip-hop principal, I want you to look in that camera and right off the dome, what you got?
No pressure. Okay. Hey, it's the 109 man, and time to shine, and I'm still shining. I'm a guy who changes schools around. Still, there are those who want to put me down. You see, I brought the uniforms to the schools, and every day it's worn. Teachers teaching at a high degree using data, and that's because of me. Children smiling on their face, there's glee. My school is where they want to be. I'm a leader. Hey, man, it's crazy. Never thought in my life that one day I'd be in charge of so many young minds, counting on me almost all the time. But my father told me when I was young, one day you're going to be a leader, son. So I stepped to the plate, man. Even though the haters, man, keep on hating, I'm a leader not because I want to rule. I'm a leader because I changed schools.
Yes, that's why they call you the hip-hop principal. Dr. Shango Blake, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's been an honor. Okay, time for another break. In Focus continues right after this. And now, this Black History Month flashback from our New York One archives. September 19th, 2018, some 5 years ago, ballet trailblazer Arthur Mitchell dies at age 84. Mitchell grew up on the streets of Harlem, and in 1955, the dancer made the historic leap from uptown to downtown, becoming the first African-American dancer with the New York City Ballet.
The fact that I was taking a black ballet company to the seat of classical ballet, and it was really amazing.
After traveling the world as a celebrated dancer, Arthur Mitchell returned to his roots, and in 1970, he founded the Dance Theater of Harlem. This performance company became his life's work, and over the course of his illustrious career, spanning some 60 years, Mitchell received numerous awards, including the National Medal of Arts. During his memorial service in 2018, Alicia Graf Mack, who got her start with the Dance Theater of Harlem, performed this solo, choreographed by her mentor, Arthur Mitchell, at his request. A fitting tribute to the legendary dancer who brought diversity to ballet.
New York One's Weather on the Ones is brought to you by your local Ford stores.